All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is July 26, 2017. We're back in the saddle talking about the news of the day. And first, I want to talk about a couple things that have come up. First things first, just a little bit of a follow-up from yesterday. I talked a little bit about Anthony Scaramucci and just, his demeanor and his mentality towards dealing with the press. Just watched his interview on CNN New Day with Comey. And then I really just want to touch very briefly on Jeff Sessions and his potential replacement, as well as just some of the shakeups that have been happening in the White House and really what that means for the presidents. All right, first things first, Anthony Scaramucci, Long Island, New Yorker, good friend of Trump's. Two things that I think are going to serve him really well in the administration are, number one, the fact that he tells it like it is. He doesn't seem to have an ulterior motive or a hidden agenda. And unlike Sean Spicer, he's not really looking to protect his job, or he may not have a competing interest, whether that be, dealing with Reince Priebus, the RNC, or the establishment elite. Or more importantly, what I always felt with Sean Spicer was that he was always looking to protect himself. He was tentative on the podium. Obviously, he didn't agree with some of the things that Trump said, but he just wasn't coming across honestly. He was not necessarily disingenuous, but he was a little bit combative, and he was always trying to sort of cover his own ass, if you sort of get that reference, CYA, cover your ass. So he just never really looked like he was comfortable in the position, and I think, his philosophy might not necessarily have matched up with Donald Trump, and that's really tough as a press secretary. So Sarah Sanders, great choice to be on the podium. Scaramucci running the department, I think it's going to be much better. And one of the things he just said in his conversation with Comey was that he's going to open up to the press corps again, which is great. You've got to interact with the press, whether you think they're good, bad, or the ugly. The good guys, the bad guys. The enemy. The main opposition, as Steve Bannon says. You got to deal with them. They're not going away, and the public deserve you. Interacting with them. It's part of the job. Obviously you want fair and balanced reporting. Ultimately, you got to deal with them. They're not going away. So Scaramucci looks like he's going to be good. He's a loyal guy. He looks like he's had some issues with some of Trump's policies. Again, he didn't endorse Trump straight away. I believe he endorsed Scott Walker and then Jeb Bush. So it was his third choice. So he's not necessarily a blind Trump supporter, but certainly understands that Trump has a mandate, he's got some pretty specific goals, and he's going to help him try to roll them out, and he's going to help him try to control his message a little bit better. Whether or not that translates into Trump tweeting less or Trump trying to control things less himself, I find that hard to believe. I think Trump will always go rogue. I think Trump, if he sees something in the news, whether he reads it or sees it on TV, he's going to respond. And one of the things that I saw Michael Smerconic say a little earlier today was that Trump has a really, really good day of controlling the message. So what he does typically is he starts tweeting in between 5 and 6 a.m. He'll fire off 5 or 6 tweets, and he controls the message for the day. Imagine you're in a newsroom and you're setting up your order of business. You might want to talk about Sessions. You might want to talk about the Russia-Iran, North Korea sanctions. You might want to talk about the warning shots that the U.S. just fired at an Iranian ship. Regardless of that, if President Trump comes on Twitter and fires off 5 or 6 tweets, he can totally divert the message in all the morning shows, and then all of the afternoon and evening shows, all the radio talk show hosts, they're going to follow that. So it's a way of Trump controlling the message. Now, this has worked for him in an excellent way sometimes, and it's been very detrimental other times. So he's got to give and take a little bit. He's got to let his press team do their job. And I think that now that he has a lot more trust, most likely, in Anthony Scaramucci, I think he's going to let him do that a little bit more. So let's see where this experiment goes. You never want to see people fired within the first 6 months. Obviously, you've seen Flynn go. Now you've seen Spicer go. We'll see what happens with Sessions. I'll get to that in a little bit. But just to follow up on that, I would be pretty surprised if you didn't see Reince Priebus go next. I think that his allegiances are too split. And Trump, when you're working that closely with him, as you can see, he does demand loyalty. Some would even say blind loyalty or loyalty to a fault. And you don't want to be in that authoritarian space where you can't hear differing opinions. But I think when you're really, really close to the president in terms of chief strategist Bannon, some of his other close strategists, of course, his daughter and his son-in-law, Kushner and Ivanka, even Kellyanne Conway, people that have gone against him like Conway have been able to maintain good standing because they back the president. So when you're in that really tight circle, when you're in the Oval Office, when you're working in the White House, Stephen Miller, these guys need to be on the same page. I think that's healthy, and I think that's fair. If you look at other departments across other countries, if you look at how Macron has really started to lead with an iron fist, or if you look at a place like Poland, if you look anywhere else, Saudi Arabia, obviously, North Korea, China, Russia, the way Putin rules, obviously these are not examples you want to use when comparing, the leader of the free world, but it's not unfair or uncommon to expect a little bit of consistency and cohesiveness within the White House. I mean, just looking at the last administration, you would have President Obama with Valerie Jarrett, David Axelrod, Hillary Clinton. He did have some tension with sometimes, but ultimately the core of his team were on the same page, and it's really difficult to control your message if you're not on the same page. So I think Scaramucci is going to be great for the American people. He's going to open up the press again. He's going to work with the president a lot better. So that's good news, okay? Now let's look a little bit at this Jeff Sessions situation. This is really the main point of this video. Jeff Sessions, understandably, recused himself from the Russia investigation because of his contacts with Kislyak and how that looked on the Hill. I think it's kind of interesting to see people running to his defense now when they had such a big problem with trying to nominate and appoint him prior. So, now you'll see the Democrats are up in arms because, Trump wants to get rid of the Attorney General when 6 months ago they were trying to block his nomination. Obviously, the tables have turned with Robert Mueller being hired, but if you look at some of the facts to do with the general counsel or the special counsel and the investigation, you can understand the tentative nature to why Trump is uneasy with this situation. And I'm going to bring up a couple things that, from my perspective, are a little bit dodgy and make you seem like, what's going on here. So number one, Attorney General and his assistant AG, Bernstein, they both did write the letter saying they had an issue with Comey. They didn't recommend his firing, but, Trump brought it up to them, and, they brought up their reservations with him. That was something that there was general consensus for on the left and the right prior to him being fired. Obviously, the timing wasn't great based on what was happening in the news. But again, if you take that story and you push it aside, and if you look at Jim Comey and his actions, throughout the campaign, both towards Hillary Clinton and towards Donald Trump, opening the investigation, leaking it out, closing the investigation, then a week before, opening it up again, then really closing it again without really looking into Anthony Weiner, Huma Abedin. Really, we never got to the bottom of the 33,000 emails, the destroyed hard drives, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the way they treated Bernie Sanders. There's a lot of issues with what happened with the DNC, with the leaking as well. One thing I found was totally unacceptable was how he leaked his memos to a confidant. I believe he was a professor at one of the Ivy League schools, and then openly admitted that in his meeting with the Senate committee. I mean, FBI director, fired or not, shouldn't be leaking information to the press. And that showed you his mentality, that he was sort of on an island, he went rogue a little bit, and he wasn't being nonpartisan. So I can totally understand why Jim Comey had to go. Now, the timing of that, the optics of that were horrible. And Donald Trump does put himself in a tough situation with how he progresses, what's going to happen, and then ultimately when he makes those kind of decisions. However, going from there, you understand why Trump was disappointed that Sessions wasn't fully transparent with his meetings with the Russians, and then also his testimony, where he said he didn't say certain things to Kislyak. And then, again, there's a leak, and you see that he did, in fact, discuss sensitive information with Ambassador Kislyak from Russia, which was picked up on a cable by the Intelligence Committee. Now, again, that cable was leaked. This is something that shouldn't happen. And again, if you're working with another world power like Russia, or if you work for another world power like Russia, you're fairly confident, or I should hope you're confident, when you know you're being taped or recorded, and then when you're on a secure line. So you have to look at that situation and say, was Kislyak setting up Sessions there? I would say that the Russians more often than not, they're looking to disrupt. They're not necessarily as prevalent in this situation as you might think, but certainly they're looking to disrupt the situation. So if they can throw a curveball in and throw Sessions under the bus, Mike Flynn got set up to some degree, probably overpromising that he could help with sanctions, and then again, not being forthright and making the vice president look bad. So there's multiple avenues, or there's multiple angles here which make things look bad for Jeff Sessions. But the real crux of this issue is really, really simple. Jeff Sessions isn't doing anything to sort of be on the offensive. And I think that's what's bothering Donald Trump. There's a lot of things that have come out, whether you believe all the stories or not, and you can go into the conspiracy theory side, you can go into what's been factually reported, whether you're talking about DNC meetings with Ukraine, that's been reported, that's fairly accurate. And what does that mean, And when you look at some of the history of Podesta and Hillary and their connections to the Russians, or even their connections to the Middle East and the Clinton Foundation and some of the donations that they received in response to favorable treatment. There's a case where Hillary was supposed to speak and receive, I believe it was $12 million from the King of Jordan at a forum. Bill ended up going instead. Obama was against it, but Hillary went ahead and did that anyway. And that pay-to-play element. Now, we haven't heard anything from Sessions on the record about the 33,000 emails, which to this day is a huge breach of trust, top-level security clearance, and just overall just seems extremely shady. I know a lot of people looked past that in the election, but a lot of people didn't, and it's a huge reason that Donald Trump was elected. Now, recently there's been some really, really fishy stuff going on. Whether you want to look at Eric Braverman, who was the Clinton Foundation CEO, he quit and then he disappeared for a long period of time. Now he's been hired by Google, still hasn't made a public appearance, still never been on the record, never addressed the media. What did he actually know, or what forced him to quit, or why was he pushed out and he ran to the Russian embassy? So that's always been a really, really strange story to me that's never really been resolved. And then after that, some of the things that have come out about Seth Rich, whether or not you believe he was shot in the back and murdered on the street at 3 a.m. for a robbery and then nothing was taken. A lot of speculation that he was the leaker to WikiLeaks. And people obviously mix up what the difference between a hack and a leak is. A hack is coming from the outside in and taking information. A leak is taking that information from the inside, disseminating it out. So never thought it was a hack for the DNC and for WikiLeaks, always thought it was a leak. And that information is coming out sort of slowly. And now you've got a large story about the Awan brothers. And if you don't know about them, do some research on your own. But essentially, they are Pakistani nationals connected to some degree to the ISI, which is essentially the Pakistani CIA. And they were running the IT for, I think, 25 or so different Congress men and women for the Democrats. And I believe that it even went across party lines there to some degree. Huge salaries, getting paid more than anyone else. Their wives also getting paid. They had kidnapped their their mother-in-law, one of their mother-in-laws. They held her, at ransom in one of their houses. Tons of ghost businesses or fake businesses, laundering money. And one of them tried to flee the country, Imran Awan, on Monday and was arrested and had his paperwork revoked. So that story is going to blow up very, very shortly. The internet's been working on that for quite a while and sort of been propagating that so that we get some mainstream coverage on it. But certainly you can see that Trump would be super annoyed with Jeff Sessions for not looking at this behavior dating back to 2016 and even before that. And really that is where Jeff Sessions has failed the president. And you cannot have blind loyalty in an attorney general. He's got to be impartial, but at the same time, he should have been very, very upfront with Donald Trump about whether or not he felt he could really approach those subjects with an impartial and clear slate. And I think that has really colored Donald Trump's opinion of Jeff Sessions, regardless of his relationships on the Hill. Trump demands loyalty, and that's where you see that relationship starting to fracture. Now, moving forward from here, I'm not sure what's going to happen on this one. I'd be shocked if he fired him, but I'm leaning towards saying that he's going to, or Jeff Sessions will resign. it's not going to look good, especially after Comey being fired, and especially if after Sessions is let go, either Trump gets rid of Mueller or if his new Attorney General gets rid of Mueller. Now, a little side note, which I did hear, is that they may move Mike Pompeo into the AG role, which would be a shrewd move, simply because he has all the CIA information now. If you don't know who Mike Pompeo is, he's the director of the CIA. Shrewd move if he's gone in there as the #1 for the CIA, looked at all the internal cables, looked at all the data, found out what's really been going on, although the deep state most likely has hidden some things from him. But then moving him to the Attorney General role to be able to prosecute would be a very shrewd move by Trump, and you start to wonder if maybe that wasn't his plan or his tactic all along, was to go into the CIA, send somebody in, get the details, get the data on who's been messing around with the internal structure of American politics, and then come out and drop the hammer. So let's see what happens. Just a quick video for today, but certainly some interesting developments in terms of American politics over the last 48/24 hours. So thanks for watching the video. Make sure you like and subscribe, leave some comments. If you have an interest in me talking about a specific subject, by all means, let me know, and I'm happy to cover it. All right, guys, thanks for now.